Hello, on this video I'm gonna create a database and then I'm gonna use Microsoft Visual Studio and a MVC project to insert data into the database. Now this is the second video of a series that I'm making. If you have not seen the first video, go check it out. I'm gonna leave the link for the first video on the description of this video. So this is where I left off from the past video. I'm going to create a very quick database now so we can query the database. So here I have MS, so I'm going to connect to the database. And make sure you have Windows authentication right here and also trust the server certificate. Click on connect. So I connect to the Microsoft SQL instance. I am going to create a database now because I do not have any. So right click, new database. I'm going to name this database the Zoo database. Click OK. And then now I'm going to create a table. So right click, new table. This column is going to be the name of the animal, varchar 50. Then the animal type, varchar 50 as well. Maybe the food. And then the ID of the animal. So the ID has to be integer, and I'm gonna set this a primary key. And then after that, I'm gonna right click, go to properties, and then change the identity column to ID. I'm gonna close and now save, and I'm gonna save this table as animal table. All right, so next I gotta go to security. And then right here in logins, I'm gonna check what I have. So I'm gonna right click and create a new login. I'm gonna give it a name. This is gonna be the Zookeeper login. I'm gonna click on SQL Server Authentication. And then I'm gonna put a password here. And the password is gonna be ABC123 and ABC123. I'm gonna change the login name here to be all lowercase and all one word, so it's easier for me to memorize. So Zookeeper. I'm gonna uncheck to enforce password policy. Now, if this was a production database, I would never do that because this is very, very unsafe. But the purpose of this video is not security. The purpose of this video is just to insert some data into this database. All right, so after that, I'm gonna go to user mapping, and I'm gonna click on Zoo on the user mapping, and then the database role membership. I'm gonna click on data writer and data reader. So now I click OK, and now I have a user called the Zookeeper here. Now I'm gonna collapse this, and then I'm gonna connect to the database again. Now this might get a little confusing because I'm already connected, but on SSMS you can connect to the database multiple times. So I'm gonna connect again to the database, and this time I'm gonna click on SQL Server Authentication, type the login, which is Zookeeper, the password ABC123. I'm gonna click on remember password, and make sure you click on Trust Server Certificates as well. So click on Connect, and then it connected. So I'm doing this just to test if the user that I just created is working properly. So now I'm gonna go over the database, expand Zoo, look at the table, and then I have a table here. I'm gonna do a right click and edit top 200 rows. And here I'm going to test if I can insert something in the database using the Zookeeper login. So I'm going to give it a name to the animal. So this animal is going to be Boba. Type is a dog. Food is dog food. I'm going to click on enter. And then sure enough, it let me insert a record in the database. I'm going to try to change the record, and that should prove that I can update the database, and yes, I can update. And then the last thing I want to do is right click on the table, script tables as, delete to new query editor, So I'm just gonna run the query to delete from animals just to see if I can delete everything. It looks like yes, I can. And then finally, I'm gonna do a select everything from animals just to make sure I do have access to delete. All right, so the last thing I want to test is if I have rights that I should not have. So for example, I'm going to try to delete the table here. And if this is successful, that means I have more rights than I should have. Remember, I am doing this operation as the zookeeper. If you look right here in the login, I'm logged in as a zookeeper. And the zookeeper should not have access to delete this table. So I'm going to try to delete, and if I can delete, then this should be wrong. And sure enough, I got an error right here. That means the delete the table did not work out. So that means I'm good to go. So when it comes to database, or as a matter of fact, any other system, you always want to give the user the least amount of privileges as possible. So that's the reason why we create user here for this database that has a very limited access. But this user can read and write and delete data from the database. All right, so now I confirm that the zookeeper login is good. So now let's write some code. So here is the MVC project that I had from the last video. So I'm going to continue writing code right here. Now, I am going to write code right here on the home controller. And usually we would not do that. Usually you would create a class separated for that. However, just for learning purpose and just to make simple, I'm going to write the code right here on the action. And then on the next video, I want to make this a little bit more beautiful, or should I say more appropriate. But for now, I'm going to write code right here. And I'm going to run this code before we keep on going, just to remind you of where we are since the last video. So we have a page, and then here I can put some data. I'm going to put AA, BB, and CC. And if I click on submit, it just goes to the second page. But remember, between going from the first page to the second page, it passes to the controller. So this data is in the controller, and this data is right here on the action for page 2, and the A is the object of the animal, and animal for us is the model that carries the animal data. Now, I want to send everything from this object to the database. So when it comes to sending stuff to the database, you do that in 4 steps. So step 1 is to connect to the database. Step 2, create a query. Step 3, query. And then step 4, close the connection. All right, let's go step by step. So the first step to connect is to get the string called the connection string. And this connection string has the properties that you're going to use to log in to the database. So it's going to have the server, the credentials, the database, and whatnot. So I'm going to create a very simple connection string. So the connection string has server equals, and then the database server. So in my case, it's going to be 192.168.1.3. Yours might be something different. And then the next piece of information that we need is the database. Mine happens to call zoo. And then I need the user ID. My user ID is the zookeeper. Then the password. And my password happens to be ABC123. And then finally, the trust server certificate equals true. All right, so this is my connection string. Usually, you would have everything in one line only, but because it's a very long string, I'm gonna break it in 2 lines. All right, so that's my connection string. And now I need to connect to the database. To do that, I'm gonna use a class called SQL connection. Con equals new SQL connection. and then pass the connection string. Now notice that the SQL connection class has a red squiggly. So that means we do not have the Microsoft SQL installed on this project. So we need to install the Microsoft data.sql client. So there are two ways for us to do that. So first I'm going to show you the hard way, and then I'm going to show you the easy way. So the hard way is for you to go to Tools and then click on NuGet Package Manager, and then click right here on Manage NuGet Package for Solution, and then right on Browse, search for Microsoft Data.SQL Client, and then right here pick the one with the latest version. I believe the latest version now is 5.2, and then click, then check here, and then install. So for me, that's too many clicks. So let's use the Visual Studio help to do that for us. So I'm gonna hover over the SQL connection, show potential fixes, and then I'm gonna click right here on install package Microsoft.data.sql client. And then once I click on that, it installs for me and the red squiggly goes away. So I prefer this. You're free to do whichever way you want to do. All right, so the next step now is to actually connect to the database. We have not connected yet, so we just created the connection string that has the credentials and the information. Then we create the object, which is called con, and now I want to actually connect to the database, and the command is con.open. Now at this point, I like to test to make sure that the connection actually opened, because if it didn't, then something is wrong here with my connection string. So I just want to make sure that everything is good so far. So I'm going to put a stopper right here on the return, and then I'm going to press F5 on my keyboard to run the debugger. All right, so here's my page. I'm going to type whatever. It doesn't really matter what we type now. And then I'm going to click on Submit. And then once I see this error right here, it means it's stopped. So now I'm going to go right here on Autos on the bottom left. Then I'm going to expand the con. On the con, I'm looking for a property called state. And if you look right here on the state, it says open. So that means the connection to the database is open. And if it's open, that means the code that I have so far works. So my next step now is to create a connection string. So you can type the connection string here, but I'm going to be lazy. And instead of typing, I'm just going to copy it. So I'm going to go to the SSMS, and then I'm going to right click on animals, and then script table as insert to new query editor. So this is the query, and I just want to get this query working before I copy and paste to my code. So I'm going to do some testing here. I'm going to insert a row on the database just to test. So Joe is a cat, and the food is going to be pizza. This cat loves pizza. All right, so now I'm gonna click on F5, and it looks like it worked. So I'm gonna do a select just to make sure the data got there, and it did. So that means this query here is good. So I'm gonna copy this query and take it to my code. All right, so the query now is this query. And since this string is very long, I'm going to break it into 2 lines as well. Now, let's talk about this query very quickly here. So this query is horrible. And the reason it's horrible is because the query should be parameterized query. So if you don't have a parameterized query, then your code is going to be very, very easy for someone to attack using the SQL injection. So I'm not gonna change this right now because this video is going to be too long. However, on the next video, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna fix this query to be safe. But for now, I'm gonna leave like that just for learning purpose. But remember, this is bad. Now, I have the query, and now I'm gonna put the query on the command. I'm gonna create a object type SQL command. So SQL command cmd equals new SQL command. And then I'm gonna pass the query and the connection. So the next step is to actually query that. So one way to query is just to call the cmd, the command, dot execute non-query. So generally speaking, when you execute non-query, that means you do not want anything back from the database. So for now, I just want to send something into the database. All right, so the last step is just to close the connection. So I'm going to type here con.close, and that will close the connection for me. So before I run this program, I want to go to the database and I'm going to clean it up because I want to make sure that whatever I insert in the database is actually there. So I'm going to delete from animals. So one row affected. Now I'm going to select from animals and I have nothing there. So good. All right, so now I'm going to run this program. And I'm going to type some data here, but it doesn't really matter what I type because the data that I'm going to insert is hard-coded right here on the query. So what I type here really does not matter. So I'm going to click on Submit. Now I'm going to go to the database and I need to see Joe, cat, and pizza on the database because these are the values that I'm inserting. So I'm going to come here to the database, query, and sure enough, I see Joe, cat, and pizza. That means the data that I sent from the database came here and it's working fine. All right, so on the next video, I'm going to clean this up, make it this safer. And also instead of using the data hard-coded, I'm actually going to use the data from the model. And before I close this video, I know I went very fast on the database. I did not explain everything that I did on the database. However, I do have some videos that I went into details on how to create the table, how to create the primary key and the increments. I'm going to leave a link on the description of this video just in case if you got lost on the database part of this video. All right, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.